NE-α Parasite. A single injection turned a mindless killing machine into a soldier who could aim a rocket launcher. That is the leap Umbrella Europe was chasing when their No. 6 laboratory built the NE-α Parasite. Standard tyrants hit hard, but they were stupid. Point them at a target and they would smash through walls to get there. Yet ask them to open a door, pull a trigger with precision, or track a moving enemy across a city, and the whole design fell apart. Scientists needed a brain, not more muscle, so they engineered a parasite that could crawl up a tyrant's spine and take over its brainstem from the inside, hijacking the nervous system the way a hacker takes over a security camera. Once installed, the host stopped being an animal and started being a hunter with a plan. It could understand spoken commands, operate heavy weapons, and chase a specific person across an entire ruined city without losing focus. That upgrade came at a brutal cost. The parasite was so aggressive that ordinary T-103 tyrant bodies suffered brain death within 5 minutes of implantation. Only a handful of genetically compatible clones ever survived the procedure, which made every successful unit a rare and expensive asset. The organism also secreted a special compound that stopped host cells from dying and pushed them into aggressive regeneration whenever the body took serious damage, meaning bullets that should have ended the fight instead triggered fresh mutations mid-battle. Raccoon City saw the results firsthand when the Nemesis T-type was released with a single mission: hunt down the surviving members of STARS one by one with the kind of tactical patience no ordinary tyrant could manage. But the strangest chapter of this parasite's history has nothing to do with weapons testing. It happened by accident. Lisa Trevor, a woman subjected to decades of Umbrella experimentation, was injected with the NE-α Parasite, and her body did something no scientist expected. Her immune system did not reject it, and it did not die from it. Her system absorbed the organism entirely, and the biological data pulled from that impossible survival became one of the direct stepping stones toward the discovery of the G-virus, meaning the smartest killer Umbrella ever built also accidentally opened the door to an even more dangerous creation: G-Embryo. Somewhere in the sewers beneath Raccoon City, a father was hunting his own daughter, and the reason came down to a single biological rule buried inside his own body. William Birkin, the creator of the G-virus, had been infected by his own research, and the virus responded by producing something new inside him, a living embryo with one instinct wired into it from the start: find a genetic match and merge. This is what made the G-embryo different from almost every other bioweapon in Umbrella's catalog. It was not random, it was searching. The embryo needed a host who shared close blood ties with the original carrier in order to bond successfully and produce what researchers called a true G-human, a fusion of human and viral biology stable enough to keep functioning and evolving. Sherry Birkin, William's own daughter, carried that exact genetic match, which is why her father's mutated body pursued her relentlessly through the city instead of attacking at random. But biology this precise has an ugly failure mode. If the embryo ends up inside a host whose DNA does not line up closely enough, the body violently rejects it within hours. The parasite does not simply die quietly inside. It bursts directly through the ribcage and rapidly mutates into something Umbrella researchers labeled a G-adult organism, a bloated, asymmetrical horror that keeps growing even without a compatible host to sustain it properly. These rejected G-adults were not harmless dead ends either. They constantly produced their own miniature offspring, nicknamed G-young, spawning smaller parasitic attackers directly from their own bodies to swarm and weaken anything nearby. There was one narrow window to stop the process before it became irreversible. A treatment known as the devil vaccine could halt embryonic fusion, but only if it was administered before the G-embryo finished integrating with the host's central organ system, meaning timing mattered more than firepower when facing this threat. Sherry Birkin survived her encounter with her mutated father, and traces of that exposure stayed with her permanently. She never transformed into a G-human, but the lingering cellular residue from the encounter gave her something almost as strange: a lifetime of unusually rapid physical healing without ever undergoing the monstrous transformation the virus was originally designed to cause. Megamycete. An entire family in rural Louisiana kept dying and coming back changed, and the explanation was buried underground the whole time. Beneath the Baker family's property sat an ancient fungal organism scientists eventually named the Megamycete, a subterranean network that had been growing for who knows how long before anyone noticed it. This was not a virus in the traditional sense. It behaved more like a living archive. Any organism that died while infected by its spores or fungal filaments did not simply vanish from the network. Its consciousness, its memories, and its genetic data got absorbed and stored inside the Megamycete's central core, sometimes for years after the physical body was gone. Hosts infected with strands of this mold, classified as E-type or molded, stayed linked together through something like a psychic tether connected to a central controlling intelligence, most notoriously the bioweapon known as Eveline. The organism's regenerative power was staggering. Damaged human tissue simply got replaced with fungal filaments, allowing infected hosts to survive injuries that should have killed a normal person outright, including decapitation, severed limbs, and direct gunshot wounds that would drop anyone else instantly. immediately. The Baker family of Dulvey became the most public demonstration of what this fungal network could do to an ordinary household, as Eveline's psychological and physical takeover twisted a peaceful family into something unrecognizable. But the single strangest fact buried in the Megamycete's history involves a man named Ethan Winters. For over 3 years, Ethan lived, walked, spoke, and fought his way through horrifying events without realizing a critical detail. He had actually been killed early on by Jack Baker during their very first encounter. His entire ongoing existence afterward was as a sentient fungal organism sustained by the Megamycete network, a consciousness kept alive and walking around with no memory of ever having died. Behind the scenes, the creation of Eveline traced back to a joint bioweapon project between a shadowy group known only as the Connections and the researcher Mother Miranda, both drawing directly from samples of this same ancient fungal superorganism to build their next generation of controllable hosts. Plaga Type 1. A parasite hatching inside someone's chest cavity sounds like a death sentence, yet the terrifying part is that the person keeps walking, talking, and using tools afterward exactly like they used to. That is the horror at the center of the subordinate Las Plagas, an ancient arthropod-like macroparasite native to the mountainous Valdelobos region of Spain. Once it hatches inside a host, it attaches directly to the central nervous system, but instead of destroying the brain the way most infections in this world do, it suppresses free will while leaving everything else fully intact. Speech stays clear, motor skills stay sharp, tool handling remains completely functional. This is the key difference between a Plaga-infected villager known as a ganado and a typical shambling zombie, because the cerebral cortex is preserved rather than rotted away, meaning the parasite is essentially riding inside a fully capable human body while steering it from behind the wheel. Scientists studying the phenomenon drew comparisons to real-world neuroparasites, particularly flatworms that alter the behavior of infected snails and certain parasitic wasps that hijack their hosts, except scaled up to something that could organize an entire village. If the host suffers decapitation or severe trauma to the skull, the adult parasite does not simply die along with the body. It emerges and takes on one of 3 combat forms: a scythe-like blade type called guadaña, a hardened jaw variant called mandibula, or a detachable spider-like form known as araña, each one capable of continuing the attack independently. There is one weakness that makes all of this stoppable. The subordinate Plaga carries an extreme vulnerability to high-intensity ultraviolet and visible light, which destroys exposed parasite tissue almost instantly, which is exactly why flash grenades became such an effective tool against infected hosts. The origin of this nightmare traces back to isolated rural villagers who were infected by inhaling fossilized spores while excavating mines belonging to the Salazar family, unknowingly breathing in an ancient threat that had been buried for generations. Strangely, not everybody accepts the parasite equally. Roughly 8% of adult males, along with nearly all children and a significant portion of women, physically reject the subordinate Plaga entirely. But rejection here does not mean safety. It results in immediate organ failure rather than conversion into a ganado, meaning the parasite either takes full control or kills its host outright with no middle ground. Cadou Parasite. A mother trying to resurrect her dead daughter accidentally created 4 of the most terrifying bioweapons ever documented, and none of them looked anything alike. That contradiction sits at the heart of the Cadou parasite, a synthetic organism engineered by Mother Miranda by fusing embryonic human tissue with a strange fungal network known as the Megamycete, or Mutamycete in some records. The entire purpose behind the Cadou was never mass destruction. It was a filter, a way to test which human bodies could withstand the kind of biological restructuring Miranda needed in order to bring back her deceased daughter, Eva. Compatibility determined everything about the outcome. Inject the parasite into someone whose DNA does not align well enough, and the result is ugly and mindless, degenerating the host into feral, uncontrollable creatures known as lichens or moreca, essentially discarding them as failed experiments. But land on a host whose biology fits, and the transformation goes in a completely different direction, producing extreme and unique biological abilities rather than simple monstrous decay. Inside a compatible body, the Cadou fuses directly with the heart, operating almost like a second brain wired into the organ, granting unusual metabolic properties on top of acting as an auxiliary neural control hub. The clearest proof of how differently this parasite can behave lives in the 4 lords of the village: Alcina Dimitrescu, Donna Beneviento, Salvatore Moreau, and Carl Heisenberg. 4 people infected with the exact same base organism, who ended up with 4 wildly different biological outcomes. Salvatore Moreau's case stands out as the strangest of them all. His Cadou triggered an unpredictable hypergrowth reaction that reshaped his internal organs into something resembling fish anatomy, giving him functioning gills and swim bladders that let him breathe and move underwater in ways no human body should be capable of. Carl Heisenberg took his transformation somewhere entirely different, fusing Cadou-infected biological tissue directly with mechanical implants and metal alloys, essentially building a biomechanical hybrid out of a parasite that was originally designed for something as intimate and desperate as bringing a lost child back to life. Master Plaga. Imagine controlling an entire village without lifting a finger, simply by thinking a command and having hundreds of infected bodies obey instantly. That level of control is exactly what the dominant NE-α Plaga strain grants its host. Developed by the researcher Louis Serra as a specialized genetically distinct variant of the original parasite, the dominant strain builds an entirely new organ inside its host, capable of emitting high-frequency acoustic waves, essentially turning a human being into a living remote control for every subordinate Plaga host nearby. What makes this version genuinely unsettling is what it does not take away. Unlike the subordinate strain, which suppresses free will in exchange for basic function, the dominant Plaga leaves the host's full personality, decision-making, and strategic intelligence completely intact, while adding total biological authority over an entire horde. Researchers studying the design drew comparisons to eusocial insect colonies. The same kind of command structure you see in a queen bee directing an entire hive, or a termite colony obeying a single central authority. The subordinate Plagas carry sensory organs specifically tuned to detect these ultra-high frequency vibrations, meaning a dominant host can issue silent orders across a battlefield without ever speaking a word aloud. Under extreme threat, the dominant strain grants something even more dramatic, allowing the host to undergo massive body restructuring on command, a last resort transformation seen in figures like Osmond Sadler and Ramon Salazar when their lives were in immediate danger. Sadler put this power on full display by using his Master Plaga to direct an entire village into laying traps, operating heavy machinery, and executing coordinated military tactics against a single target, Leon S. Kennedy, treating an army of infected villagers like pieces on a chessboard. Removing this strain is nearly impossible once it takes hold, since the parasite integrates deeply with the host's vascular system, tangling itself around the heart and spinal cord in a way that makes extraction without killing the host almost unachievable. And underneath Salazar Castle sits the true source of it all, a massive subterranean organism known as the Queen Plaga, functioning as the biological mother organ that produces every subordinate egg used to spread the infection in the first place. Plaga Type 2 and Type 3. Turning an entire town into a coordinated army usually takes years of infection and incubation, but one modified strain compressed that entire process into seconds. TRICELL and Albert Wesker engineered this leap by modifying the original Plaga design into two aggressive new versions built specifically for combat efficiency. Type 2 solved a major logistical problem for anyone trying to weaponize the parasite quickly. Instead of relying on egg incubation, which takes time and exposes the process to interruption, a mature parasite could simply be forced down a victim's throat, seizing complete control of the host within seconds of oral injection. This turned infection from a slow biological process into something closer to an instant weapon deployable in the middle of active combat. Type 3 took a different route entirely, splicing Plaga genetics together with traits pulled from the dominant strain alongside ancient NE-α bloodlines, producing hosts with massive increases in height and raw muscular strength. That power came at a horrifying physical price, since the rapid growth caused severe tearing and damage to the host's skin as the body expanded far beyond normal human proportions. Both strains also produced distinctive secondary mutations once a host body was destroyed, including a centipede-like head replacement called Cephalo and an armored head shell variant known as Duvalia, meaning even killing the human shell did not necessarily end the threat. The clearest demonstration of how fast Type 2 could spread happened across the Kijuju Autonomous Zone in Africa, where ordinary peaceful citizens were converted into aggressive, weaponized hosts known as Magini in a matter of minutes, turning an entire regional population into a hostile force almost instantly. Type 3 carried its own devastating design flaw hidden beneath its raw power. It only proved viable inside male hosts, causing an immediate 100% mortality rate whenever it was tested on female subjects. A fatal limitation that TRICELL's researchers never managed to correct. The scale these strains could reach became terrifyingly clear through creatures like Popokarimu and Desu, massive bioweapons produced by inserting Type 2 and Type 3 plagas into bats and human giants, proving that the same core parasite could be scaled up into something built purely for large-scale destruction. EIA Plaga Strain. a rebel militia commanding packs of monsters against government tanks sounds like something out of a nightmare, and it became reality through a black market version of a parasite originally designed for a Spanish village. This modified strain, developed during the Civil War documented in Resident Evil Damnation, took the dominant Plaga design and repurposed it for direct military use, allowing synthetic injection of control parasites into human adults, specifically so they could command liquor bioweapons on command. That cross-species control was the entire point of the modification. Human hosts infected with this strain could issue direct acoustic and neural orders to T-virus creatures, bridging two completely different bioweapon programs that were never designed to work together in the first place. Controlling something outside your own species does not come free though. The strain placed severe strain on the human host's body, causing rapid petrification and progressive paralysis of internal organs the longer someone used it to issue commands. What makes this particular strain stand out from Umbrella's original research is how it reached the battlefield in the first place, rather than relying on ritualistic infection ceremonies or cult-level indoctrination the way earlier Plaga outbreaks had spread. Independent militias streamlined the entire process using basic surgical tools, turning a once mysterious ancient parasite into something closer to a black market military product. Rebel leader Alexander Kozachenko, known by the alias Buddy, became the clearest example of this strain in action, using a control Plaga to direct an entire pack of lickers against government tanks and armed forces in open combat, essentially fielding a monster squad as a substitute for conventional weaponry. There is one narrow surgical option for anyone infected before the parasite completes full integration. Removal is possible before complete spinal fusion sets in, but the procedure leaves the host permanently paralyzed due to the damage already inflicted on the central nervous system, meaning survival always comes at a steep and lasting cost. The genetic fingerprint of this weaponized strain did not disappear after the war either. Traits pulled directly from these modified Plagas were later adapted by Glenn Arias, as documented in Resident Evil Vendetta, refining the design even further into a tool capable of selecting and targeting specific individuals with lethal precision.